the high-profile case of Jerry Sandusky, Pennsylvania lawmakers have turned their attention to the laws that protect our children. A special task force was assigned to study these laws and determine if new ones are needed. Let's spend a few minutes with former child abuse prosecutor, Representative Todd Stevens. Representative Stevens, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I understand you're getting ready to introduce, or have introduced, a bill that will help expand the reporting. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about the role of the Child Protection Task Force?
Sure. In the wake of the Jerry Sandusky scandal up at Penn State, the legislature impaneled a task force. It was chaired by Bucks County District Attorney David Heckler, a longtime friend and certainly a terrific prosecutor and former lawmaker, which is, I think, very helpful. That task force worked for almost a year. And then they developed a pretty comprehensive report. It's a binder, it's pretty thick. And they developed a number of recommendations and new laws that they think would help better protect our children here in Pennsylvania. And now the legislature is working on, moving those laws forward.
Currently, there are certain people that are required to report suspected child abuse, but you have a piece of legislation introduced that would expand that list. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The task force found that our current mandated reporters were insufficient, and we needed to expand that list and expand the instances during which they needed to report suspected child abuse. So that's exactly what my bill does, House Bill 436. It's already come out of committee unanimously, and it's working its way through the legislature. It's important to note, there are a lot of different groups that are involved here. You have attorneys, you have physicians, you have psychologists, you have daycare workers, teachers. I mean, there's a number of different groups, and we focused primarily on those folks that would interact with children or who have significant interaction with those who interact with children. So the other thing we wanted to make sure we did was we had problems in the Penn State case where the current law requires individuals to report sort of up their chain of command, not directly to the Department of Public Welfare, to Childline. That's who receives these reports. So the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that everyone in that chain, in that progression, chain of command, had to report directly to Childline so that no links in the chain were broken and therefore a child was unprotected, which is what happened in the Penn State case.
Now, in your legislation, there's also a penalty portion. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. The task force took a look and said, look, right now the penalties are a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree for someone who fails to report suspected child abuse. As a former prosecutor of child abusers, that was completely insufficient for me to just have a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree as the penalty. So my legislation proposes felony penalties in the event that someone doesn't report felony abuse. For instance, if a child is being sexually assaulted, which is a felony, and an individual does not report that, then I think that individual ought to be subject to a felony as well. And so my legislation ramps up the penalties significantly. At the bottom end, there still is a misdemeanor of the 2nd degree, but it does provide instances where it will be felony penalties if you fail to report suspected child abuse.